Okay, so this is the fourth video lecture on the chapter on culture. In this lecture, I'm going to talk about some concepts related to cultural change and then theory, and wrap the chapter up by talking about theory. So when we think about how cultures change, there's some different ways that this happens. One, we have this concept of innovation, and our definition of innovation is when a new idea or a new thing appears in a society or in a culture for the first time. And an innovation can be because of a discovery, it can be because of someone identified or something became known that wasn't previously known, or an invention. And an invention can be something new, either something unknown, so it can be a discovery or an invention, or it can be a rearrangement. Regardless, these would be considered innovative because there's something new that wasn't there before, the first time it appears in a culture. One way that innovations can happen is through the process of diffusion. Diffusion, in some textbooks, we use the term cultural diffusion, but this is basically when one culture spills over into another. Sometimes there's this notion of cultural leveling, so it's the idea that things become the same, but cultural diffusion is an integration of some idea that spills over into another culture. The thing that comes to my mind actually is some of the Japanese culture. I know my son is very much into Japanese culture and some of the food and like oh golly, what do we call it? Anime? Not anime, is it? Anyway, some of the culture, and then I think about like Hello Kitty, which when I was growing up. But anyway, but the point is that these cultures become they diffuse. Globalization is a term, and it is a kind of diffusion, but it's a diffusion that's based around the marketplace. So when nations begin to trade with each other, or the goods go back and forth, money goes back and forth, we would call that globalization. And increasingly, we're living in a globalized world. In another chapter, I'll ask you, I'll offer an opportunity for an assignment where you go through your closet and you look at where clothing is made and notice the tags, because our clothing is very much a globalized, very few of the things that we wear are made in the United States. Cultural lag is related to the relationship between material and non-material culture. You'll remember from a couple lectures ago, when our stuff changes before we have adopted or figured out how we think about that stuff. So the best example in my lifetime is certainly cell phones. These cell phones appear in our culture. They're innovative. People, it's a thing. Everyone has one, but we haven't quite figured out what the rules and what the culture, what the expectations are about when we can talk on our phone. Should they go off in church? And now cell phone use is so common and texting is so common, you're less likely to see like the signs that say please don't be on the phone, because obviously the technology, the innovation have changed even more, and so that's changed the way people treat them. Other examples I think of are medical examples. So the ability to clone, for instance, we have the technology to completely clone, but have we figured out the rules, the non-material elements of how we use that technology? Right, so that's what I mean by cultural lag. Okay, the three big theories. You've heard me talk about the theories in previous chapters: functional theory, conflict theory, symbolic interactionism. These are three really important ideas. They're going to keep coming up. The functionalist perspective on culture is that the things that we see in culture, the rules and the items, all serve a function. And our values reflect what is important to us, and the things in our culture serve a purpose. That all elements of culture, sanctions, subcultures, all of these things serve a certain purpose, that they serve a function. And together, right, together, all of these elements make up a society and serve some purpose. So when we look at things like countercultures, we have to say, well, what function do they serve? Who do they, what need, is being met by this social group, right? So everything serves a purpose. Conflict theory, if you remember, conflict theory is really all about competition, and it argues that the social structure, that our cultural institutions, the cultural rules are really about maintaining a system of inequality. So things like the institutions, the law enforcement institution, the economy, education, even the family, they are inherently unequal and they are inherently conflictual, that within the family, within the economy, within the military, within education, that the way the rules and the system is set up is to benefit some people at the expense of other people. From a conflict theorist perspective, we can look at any element of society and ask the question, who does this benefit? Who is profiting and who is being exploited. Right. So culture creates a system of inequality. The powerful decide what is important. All elements of culture reinforce this kind of social inequality, and economic and production systems benefit some and exploit the others. So from a conflict theorist perspective, we might look at law enforcement and the rules and say that it's people of privilege, it's wealthy people who make these rules, and they make the rules in a way that benefit them and actually come at a cost, a social or an economic cost to the less powerful. Symbolic interactionism. So remember, this is a micro theory. This is really about This is really This theory is most obvious sort of on an individual level. That's why we call it a micro theory. So from this theory, when we look at culture, we ask ourselves, we consider like, what does it mean? What do the symbols mean? From this theory argues that society or culture is what we call socially constructed, that the things that are important in society, we collectively decide what they are important. We give them meaning. Um, Gosh, I'm kind of at a blank as to offer a better example. Culture is something that's transmitted through generations. It is by me explaining it to my children what things mean, why the rules are the way they are, what traditions mean, that I pass on my culture to the next generation. So culture is created through our interaction. When I celebrate Christmas with my children learn what Christmas means. And in this way, I am creating the meaning of Christmas and I am passing it to the next generation. Sometimes these meanings change over time, but they change through interacting with someone as society changes. And by the traditions that I use are different than the traditions that my mother uses, and or the traditions that my mother carried out, and in this way I am changing the meaning of Christmas. So my mother's generation did it a certain way, I do it a certain way, and my children will do it another way, and in that way all of these meanings change. So hopefully you also remember this example from the previous chapter, the example of the tree, right? So for her, the tree is about shade and it is about comfort. That's what it means. And so she interacts with the tree as if it's good, it's shade and it's comfort. He, on the other hand, sees the tree as like spiders and itchy and not good. And so he interacts with the tree as if it is a spider. But together, they also have a shared understanding of what trees mean, and they can change what it means through their own interaction with each other. And in this way, they can construct, I hope this makes some sense, in this way, they can construct what the tree means. So this wraps up. Let me just say that again. Okay, so going back, you have functional theory. Functional theory says that all things in culture serve some function, they meet some social need. And the question really is like, if we want to understand why something is the way it is, we ask ourselves, what does this do? Right? Or, what are the consequences or what does this do? So culture helps people meet their needs, it reflects what's important, and all of them serve some need. Conflict theory, that everything in culture is about maintaining a system of inequality. The people who make the rules are making rules, are creating a culture that benefits them, and the people that don't have the resources um, basically don't have the ability, the power to create the same, to access the same resources. And then symbolic interactionism says is that culture is created through our interaction, and it's really all about meaning, that by interacting with society and interacting with each other that we create meaning. Okay, I hope you read the textbook, so maybe that'll make a little bit more sense if you read the book. And this wraps up the video lectures for chapter 2.